All right, when we talk about diabetes, we usually focus on the big things, right? Blood sugar, insulin, things like that. But today, we're going to look somewhere else, somewhere a little deeper. We're diving into our gut to ask a fascinating question. Could invisible chemical clues, starting with our food and our gut bacteria, actually predict our risk for diabetes years down the line? Let's get into it.
I mean, just think about that for a second. A single test that could tell you way before you have any symptoms that you're heading down the path to type 2 diabetes. It honestly sounds like something out of science fiction. But a brand new study, just out of rural China, might have found a clue that brings this idea a little closer to reality. So what exactly did they find?
Okay, so this clue comes from a really big research project called the Hand in Eye Study. And I want to be clear, this isn't some small one-off experiment. This is a serious, long-term look at the health of a huge group of people. And that's why the insights it's giving us are so powerful.
So here's the basic setup. You have researchers tracking thousands of adults for more than 6 years. Right at the very beginning, they take blood samples and measure these really specific chemicals that come from our diet and our gut. And then they just wait. Years later, they go back to those original blood samples to see if there were any hidden differences between the folks who ended up getting diabetes and the ones who stayed healthy.
Now, let's introduce the three main characters in this chemical story. First, you've got choline. It's an essential nutrient we get from our food. Then there's betaine, which our body can actually make from that choline. And finally, there's TMAO, which is a compound that our gut bacteria produce. Now, you're going to want to remember these names, especially betaine, because it turns out it's kind of the star of the show here.
All right, so the researchers have their groups all set, they have their chemical suspects lined up, so they start crunching the numbers, comparing the two groups. And this is where it gets really interesting.
And here it is, the first major clue. On average, the people who would eventually develop diabetes years later had lower levels of betaine in their blood from day one compared to the people who stayed healthy. Now, it's not a massive difference, you can see the numbers there, but it was a consistent pattern.
This is the key finding. When the scientists split everyone into 4 groups, from the lowest betaine levels to the highest, they found something pretty striking. The group with the absolute highest betaine levels had around a 40% lower chance of developing diabetes compared to the group with the lowest levels. A 40% difference, that is a really strong signal.
But you know, in science, there is almost always a catch. And here it is. While that 40% trend is super compelling, once the scientists adjusted for everything else, I'm talking BMI, waist measurements, all that stuff, the result just barely missed the strict cutoff for what they call statistical significance. So what does that mean? It means the signal is definitely there, it's just not quite strong enough yet to be called a slam dunk predictor all by itself.
But the clues didn't stop with just that one number. The study also found that higher beta-bletine levels were tied to the body's responding better to insulin, and that's exactly what you want to see for preventing diabetes. Even cooler, they found the actual fingerprints of our lifestyle choices in these chemicals. People who ate more fruit had higher choline, and people who exercised more intensely had lower TMAO. It's all connected.
Okay, so we've got all this really fascinating data. Higher betaine seems to be protective, and it's tied to our diet and how much we move. So that brings us to the biggest, most practical question of all.
So, with everything we've just talked about, should you be running to your doctor on Monday morning asking them to test your betaine levels? Is this the new secret weapon? And the honest, straightforward, science-backed answer is no, not yet. As exciting as all this research is, and it really is pointing the way to the future, it's just not ready for your doctor's office today.
And here's the quick rundown on why. First, this study shows a link, a correlation, but it doesn't prove that low betaine causes diabetes. Second, like we said, that link just wasn't quite strong enough after all the statistical adjustments. And finally, and this is the bottom line, no major medical group currently recommends this test for preventing diabetes. The evidence just isn't solid enough. Yet.
So if the big takeaway here isn't a new blood test, then what is it? Well, what this study really does is it gives us a powerful new way to see the oldest health advice in the book. It shows us what's actually happening deep inside our bodies. This, right here, is the real magic. When your doctor tells you to eat better and move more, that's not just some soft advice. You are literally launching a direct biochemical attack. Your choices actually change your gut bacteria, which then changes the chemical signature of your blood, boosting things like that protective betaine. And that change, it seems, can directly lower your risk down the road.
Look, this study is a really important piece of the puzzle for the future of diabetes prevention. It's a peek at where this is all going. So, based on this type of research, what could a checkup look like in, say, the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, in the pretty near future, we could see new risk calculators that add in markers like betaine to give you a way more accurate picture of your personal risk. A few years after that, you might get diets that are specifically designed to boost these good chemicals. And long-term, the dream is to use this kind of data not just to prevent diabetes itself, but to stop all those awful complications, like heart and kidney disease, before they even get a chance to start.
So, what's the bottom line here? It's that you have so much more power than you think. This research is just more proof that the boring advice is actually the most profound. Change what's on your plate, change your daily walk, and you are actively, biochemically changing those invisible chemicals in your blood that could decide your future health. That's the real takeaway. Thanks for tuning in.